Everything that we preach and talk about in this program didn't materialize out there today. So a lot of lack of discipline, lack of reactionary intelligence, just a lot of different things that we got to get better at. Got to continue to preach. Have high expectation as coaches. Obviously, I hope the players have even higher ones. So completely unacceptable, especially some of the reactions in the late in the game that we can't have. So. Obviously to start the game the way we did defensively, giving up two quick scores, we battled ourselves back into it, get the touchdown, and then that late second half touchdown was tough to take. And then talked at halftime about where we are, what we want to do. We knew we had deferred the coin toss and knew we'd take the ball offensively. Thought the offensive staff and players came out fired up and took the first drive and took it down to score, and then obviously did not hold them defensively to have us give up another score. I think that was kind of the turning point that turned it. Had a few things go against us, and our reactions weren't good. So got a lot of work to do. Good news is we have a Big Ten opponent coming this week, right? The two last weeks, this week and last week, are learning experiences that are very, very difficult to go through. But unfortunately, where we are right now, that's part of the process. So take a lot of responsibility. It's just unacceptable coaching and the reactions that our guys had to adversity there was not what we're looking for. So we'll get that addressed as soon as tomorrow.
What are you seeing the most worrisome trends after the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think the big one defensively is we had some the first play, first significant play was an ME, right? A guy that adjusted to something that was the improper adjustment. So when those things happen, it's either A, they knew the answer and didn't do it, or B, they did an answer or did something that they weren't supposed to do. So really got to address the failure to execute our basic game plan early on. I knew they were going to do a couple formations, a couple adjustments, and that's why we wanted to try to keep it simple and make our guys keep the ball in front of them. That's not what we did, obviously, in the back end.
How challenging is it, in a second in a row where you do find yourself in that?
Yeah, the one thing you can't do is you can't coach confidence, right? Like a kid has to feel that. He has to. It's a very hard thing. You can say things and do things and try to build it up, but until they've actually done it, until they've actually executed it in a big time environment, they tend to flinch and go back to things they've reverted to. I look Tony Adams, who's got more than enough ability and mental strength and love the attitude and everything, and he's got a routine plays on top of a guy, and he just grabs him, he flinches. He actually almost makes an interception, but his reaction was to grab when, and it's a penalty, and that's just something that's hard for us to get, but it's something that we got to keep preaching and coaching and hopefully get it out of him.
Along those lines, Bret, taking over a program that hasn't won.
Yeah.
Other than that, what are the hardest parts of turning that mindset?
The unwavering way, emotion of just doing it the right way over and over and over, even when they haven't seen it, right? To be able to battle through the adverse moments, and then there's going to be one moment, there's going to be one time where somebody's going to do something that'll kind of just affect the whole sideline, and when that happens, I think it'll be significant, and we'll definitely feel it when it happens. But it's something you can't really force. It's just got to naturally come out of there. I think defensively, also we got to get guys that are just ready to just pull the pin and go, right? Like react to what they see and make a play. There's a lot of things offensively that they do, but the number one thing we got to do is tackle, and that's something I didn't see. Going back to last spring to this fall, we hadn't missed tackles, and today we missed a lot of tackles.
So the decision to go with ours, was Brandon fully cleared?
Yeah, didn't get cleared until literally at the end of this week. He didn't get any practice reps. Really didn't want to. He literally didn't take any practice reps. He threw and was at practice, but wasn't cleared till basically game time, and to put him in that situation just isn't fair to him.
What did you see maybe in that first scoring drive in the second half that worked well, and then maybe what wasn't repeatable?
For us offensively? Yeah. I thought, one of our things was to, get the ball on the perimeter and do some things there that I thought were good. When Josh was in there, when McCray's in there, we, threw in some pass plays, right? He had been there primarily when it was run plays, so we gave up a couple different looks to them that we had shown earlier in the season as well as during the course of the game. But just playing with some confidence, we stayed ahead of the chains. I thought that was a big part of our game plan, was to stay ahead of the chains offensively, and that we were able to do that on that drive. Really, any of the drives that we had success, that's what happened. We stayed ahead of the chains.
I guess then, maybe
I think we got a critical penalty, right? I remember we had an 8-yard gain. It was going to have been 2nd and 2, and we got a personal foul for talking too much to an opponent. So that changed it from a 2nd and 2 to a 2nd and 12 or whatever it was, 2nd and extra long. So I mean, again, it's hard enough to beat an opponent. We can't beat our opponent and ourselves. So to execute and do the things we have to do to beat our opponent has to be our focus.
Can you talk a little bit more about the culture things, the penalties, the football IQ stuff?
Yeah.
Those challenges and how do you address those?
Yeah, I think the big one, right? Like I look at where we were that first game. I believe we had 4 penalties, if I'm not mistaken, and then I think we might have had 4 penalties on one drive this time. It's just like when it rains, it pours, and again, it's not so much what happens; it's how you react to what happens, and the clarity of that. Even myself, like I have to make sure that I handle the moment and react to the things that I see in our players. There's definitely some teaching moments that we had today that I think will be even more maximized tomorrow during film sessions.
And the fall behind early, does that take you a little bit out of your comfort zone offensively?
Well, to be on the road, right, and to be down 14 before the midway through the first quarter is not a positive thing. But I did like the response that our offense gave. Defensively, they came in and played all the way to I believe that 3-minute mark. But again, that drive, if I'm not mistaken, was or early in the second half was created by we get them into 3rd down, 3rd and 4, and we jump off sides, right? I mean, we just some things that we can't do. You can't do everything you're supposed to do to get them in a 3rd down situation and give them a free play.
I think you talked about something along the lines of something will happen and that confidence will kind of spark.
Yeah.
Those galvanizing moments, I mean, you can't really force them, but is there any way you can accelerate?
Yeah, I think that's the number one driving force for our coaches, right? Is to put it in their hands. Offensively, defense, special teams. You give them a plan, you give them the execution, you give them the fundamentals, you coach them. But until they feel it, right? It's one thing to know it, right? Like, I know how to do this, I know how to do that, but they got to feel it. They have to be able to understand this is when it happens, right? When I do this, this is the result. And until they go through that, until they feel that, it's more of just something we're chasing.
I know you're focused on this season, but how does all that play into recruiting? Is it a recruiting issue? I mean, have you identified these last couple of weeks what some of your needs
I appreciate the question. I think recruiting is recruiting, right? Like, when I'm out on the field during a game, like, I'm not thinking about recruiting. Football is football. Played on Saturdays. Everything always affects recruiting, right? From every press conference to every phone call you make to every detail that we do during the course of the week. But game days is its own special entity. Obviously, the defeats and victories will affect recruiting in that regard. But I don't really ever look at recruiting on a game day environment, right? The roster is what we had and what we did and what we added till fall camp, and now we'll play the season as we see it, and then then we'll make a transition to next year's roster and that. But I don't really see it as that.
With Brandon cleared going into next week, what's the next week?
Yeah, I think a short week. Obviously, Brandon's played a lot of football, so once he's been back into practice and get himself in an environment, we'll see where he's at physically, right? Just not if he's physically cleared to play, but now it's the quarterback is a critical position. So I think to have him and Art both with a lot of experience is nothing but a positive.
Marlon, or go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You changed some offensive line things at the start of the game. I know they were rotating.
Yeah.
What did you see on that?
Yeah, so Julian Pearl came in last week and did some really good things, had 17 plays and played really well. So we moved him into the guard, which is something we had actually done in fall camp. When we came into the season, Palcho hadn't really ever played a successive number of plays, X number of plays. He'd been limited to about a 20 or 30 play count. And really, even going into our opener against Nebraska, we wanted to keep a minimum number on him. So we knew that the only guy really that we felt could play tackle at this level was also JP. So once Palcho gave us an indication that he felt good playing an entire game, then we felt better about moving Julian in and try to get our best 5 offensive linemen on the field, and that's kind of what drove it more than anything.
Coach, I imagine this type of frustration and adversity is hard to replicate in a practice. So how do you move forward from some of the things that you mentioned of, okay, we didn't have the right reaction
Right.
to this, we didn't do that the way we wanted to. How do you replicate that and maybe move forward?
Well, I think first the assessment of it, right? We have to understand what happened, right? So in my belief, right, there's actually probably some guys that don't even realize consciously that that reaction wasn't correct, right? Like it literally has to be pointed out. They have to be aware of it, and then they have to be obviously be able to learn from it. I think that's the hardest thing sometimes when you're taking over a program, when you're beginning to establish this mentality is, as a coach, you identify it. Maybe, somebody from the outside looking in realizes an issue, but unless you can actually, have a young man replicate and give you confirmation yes, that was the incorrect response, that's kind of where we're at right now. So I think just to be able to do that is a big step in the right direction.
And injury-wise, I saw Sidney Brown didn't play the second half.
Yeah,
Can you
I
talk
think
about him?
I think he in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken, took a shot to the shoulder, and that's basically what kept him out. I know at halftime they told me he wasn't going to be back in the game, but I don't know anything more than that. Go ahead, Joe.
There was just a couple of times you saw you get a little deeper down in the depth chart defensively. Was that schematic? Were you trying to find a little bit of a pop there?
No, I think I don't know exactly who, but obviously with the departure of CJ, right? That brought in a lot of different options at linebacker. I think McCarron got in there. Tariq obviously last week and this week. Kaylon Tolson. I think on the edge we wanted to play more of the next group of defensive ends, OC and Isaiah. But really was excited to get all those outside linebackers in the room, and especially young guy Dwayne Johnson got out there. He's just a very twitchy, good edge rusher, a guy that I was excited to see do some things out there. And then in the back end, we don't have a lot of options, but we did play Taz a little bit more, and I think Quan made a couple big plays. So hopefully that's something that we continue as a positive.